their perception of you is just truly that, their perception of you. It's not who you are. And I think I have to remind myself that, because I think that was also one of the issues when I was younger, and one of the issues that I still have is that I don't like being perceived, mostly because the perception people have of me is typically wrong. It's not the perception I want them to have. And when I notice that they're having this wrong perception of me, it makes me really uncomfortable. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Mindfully Mad. I'm your host, Michelle, and I'm testing out a new layout today. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you see the video, you will mostly probably see my hand moving around, but you're not going to see my face. But I'm here. I'm just hiding, just trying to test out if I like this setup, which I kind of do. It's kind of nice. Today's topic is actually a really fascinating one. Slightly random, very random, but okay, so let me just back up. I had a conversation with my boyfriend, and he, I think, had made like a claim or something that he thinks I come across as shy because I'm mostly quiet and reserved. And that opened up all of this. And I sat down and started typing away and started having all of these like kind of ideas and realizations, because this isn't the first time somebody had claimed that I was shy. And so I was like, I wonder why there's a pattern of people telling me they think that I come across as shy, and that's their first impression of me. And I thought it was odd because that's not the impression I have of myself. So, which led me to this question right here. Am I shy, or is it just my anxiety? So that's kind of what we're going to be tackling today. Like, talking about, is shyness and anxiety related? I think, there's certain things that people do that when they're shy, but I think it's also like that could also apply to somebody who has anxiety. So we're kind of tackling that concept and idea. Okay, when I was young, I was definitely shy. I'll admit to it. I was a shy kid. I was definitely more quiet, more reserved. I didn't really want to be seen or perceived. I was more than happy to let somebody else kind of shine their light as long as I wasn't center stage. And I don't know why. I don't know why that was me as a kid. But that was me particularly when I felt uncomfortable in a space. I think I was just a very sensitive, empathetic kid who felt a lot and didn't know that she could feel that much. And so when I came into a space and would feel extremely overwhelmed, I would just go quiet. And I think that's why people used to perceive me as shy, and why I perceive myself as shy. But not much has changed. Because even now that I'm older, I'm the same way. It's like if I come into a space and I feel overwhelmed, I feel like maybe the energy is off, or, people's behaviors are off, and I can sense that. And I can sense that they're being kind of inauthentic, that it's almost as if it annoys something within my system, whether it's unconscious or subconscious or not. I respond to that by being quiet and being more reserved. And I think people tend to have this preconceived notion of shyness as if it's caused or correlated with being shy and reserved. Now, do I think there is a correlation? Yes. I just don't think that there's a causation. Meaning, people who are more shy, people who are shy are often reserved and quiet. But people who are quiet and reserved are not always shy. And so, yeah, there is a correlation, but I don't think one causes the other. And I think that's what most people kind of get mixed up about. And why I have been claimed shy by so many people, but in reality, I don't think that's the case. I think it's just my anxiety and my sensitiveness to the world around me. So does that make sense? If you agree, please, comment down below. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me if you relate to that, because I definitely think that I'm onto something. So back home in Sweden, when I had my boring corporate 9-to-5 job, when I first started, I was, again, very quiet, very reserved. The space that I was walking into was it wasn't the calmest of spaces. It was very anxiety inducing. And so because of that, I was very introverted and quiet, which was not a great thing, as considering it was a customer service job. Eventually, I truly blossomed into it. And even the people at the end, when I was leaving, people said, oh, you were so shy and quiet when you started, and look at you now, you're so extroverted, you come out of your shell, and your comfort zone, and you're so much better at the job. And I've noticed that pattern because the same thing that was told to me when I started working here in Santa Barbara, where I live now. And I've noticed this pattern in my life where people claim that when they first meet me, I come across as shy and introverted. And then eventually, once I get comfortable and settle into the space, I blossom and I get out of my shell and my comfort zone. And so that idea is also kind of what made me question, maybe it's not that I'm shy. Maybe it's truly just my anxiety and my sensitiveness to the world around me. Because I feel a lot of things. I walk into a space and I observe who's around me, how I feel, why that person is talking to me in that tone, why they're making those facial expressions, why do they seem like they're not being truly themselves, why am I freaked out, and why am I overthinking this, and now that I'm overthinking this, I'm quiet. Do you see my process? That's me. Not all the time, but sometimes I get so caught up in my own mind, in my own overthinking self, that I get quiet because I'm talking to myself in my mind and it's really loud. So, and that's why people are like, oh, she must just be shy, or she must not, feel comfortable taking space. And it's like, well, okay, I am uncomfortable with taking space, which can, open up a whole other can of worms. But it's just that I have a very rich inner world, and I often get sucked into it, particularly when I am overwhelmed and when there's a lot of people around me. But that's not always the case. I know that there's been some times when I have felt just more comfortable coming into a space from the get-go, and I've been pretty extroverted because I have people in my life that I know, acquaintances, who their first impression of me was, oh no, you seem very extroverted and talkative and outgoing. I'm shocked that somebody had claimed you to not be that way. So it's interesting having that duality. And also coming to this idea that, wow, you're going to meet so many people in your life, and they're all going to have complete different perceptions of who you are. You know, person number A is going to have a perception of you that you're shy. Person number 2 might say that, oh, she's pretty outgoing. Person number 3 might be like, oh, sometimes she's introverted, sometimes she's extroverted. Depends on the situation. Like, there's going to be so many people, and they're not going to fully grasp who you are. And that's okay, I guess. It's fine. They don't have to. At the end of the day, their perception of you is just truly that, their perception of you. It's not who you are. And I think I have to remind myself that, because I think that was also one of the issues when I was younger, and one of the issues that I still have is that I don't like being perceived, mostly because the perception people have of me is typically wrong. It's not the perception I want them to have. And when I notice that they're having this wrong perception of me, it makes me really uncomfortable. And so I have to remind myself that, okay, that's their perception. They think I'm introverted and quiet. Fine. That's okay. Let them. I mean, sometimes I am. But that doesn't have to mean it's your entire truth. That doesn't have to mean that that's your entire personality. Because we're multifaceted beings, you know? And so we have the right to be the full spectrum. And people only get to see one part of that spectrum. They only get to see a blip of who you are. They don't know all of you. And maybe they never will, and that's okay. Yeah. Those are some wise words. I think there's another component that is worth mentioning, and I think it's your upbringing and your culture. I think that has a big role in how you present yourself to the world, right? And why maybe some kids end up more quiet and more reserved, and why some don't. Yeah, I think that it has a lot to do with your upbringing and how you were raised, and again, your culture. I can only speak from my own experience, right? I can't really say much for other people within my culture, but personally, I think being raised in a more Middle Eastern culture has shaped how I present myself to the world. A really good example of this is growing up, and okay, let me preface this whole thing by saying no hate, or I'm not trying to call out, my parents or my grandma or my family. Truly, like, none of that. I am just speaking on my experience, and I think that I have the right to, as a human, to share my experience. And I should also say that, like, there are people within my culture who did probably have it worse than me, who had way stricter parents, who were like extremists in that way. My mom and my dad really weren't. They were way more modern. Like, I know people where their parents were not as modern as mine. So I'm so thankful for that. I think a lot of it would have been worse if they were. Just knowing me and knowing how I am, I'm such a free spirit, and I think I would have felt really constrained if I had parents who were extremists. And yeah, again, I'm so happy they weren't. But at the same time, there are still certain things that I experience which I think kind of influences why I ended up becoming more reserved and quiet and not taking up too much space. And so an example of this would be, let's say when I was younger, I was taught that like other people's needs came before my own. For example, like, and I think this is common in my culture as well. So just to kind of give you like a neutral picture of what I'm trying to say, there's person A and person B. Let's say person A is Susan, and person B is, I don't know, Kate. So let's say Kate was playing with her doll. This is Kate's doll, and she loves this doll and she wants to play with it, and Susan was, playing with something else, and now Susan is like, oh, I want to play with your doll, and Kate's like, no, like, I'm playing with my doll, like, do you want to play with this doll, or do you, like, should we do this instead? And Susan's like, no, like, I want to play with your doll, and she's making a fuss. And to quiet her down, Kate's parents or grandma or relative or whatever would be like, Kate, it's okay, like, just let her have the doll so she can be quiet and you can play with something else. Now, this is understandable. I get it. Like, for now that I'm a grown up and I'm looking from the outside, peeking through or peeking in, I can see why the parents or the grown-ups' reaction was that, because they just wanted to quiet Susan down. Susan's whining. Susan's being a little bitch, So, and because Susan isn't your child or your grandchild, it's easier to speak with your child instead. And it's easier to reason with your child instead. And so you're like, hey, just let her have this one, right? Now, one time, got it. 2 times, fine. But if that keeps happening and it's being repeated, then Kate is going to grow up putting everybody else's needs before hers, because she was taught, conditioned to believe that her needs don't particularly matter. And all the Susans in the world are going to be able to take up that space that Kate feels uncomfortable in, if that makes sense. So I think that's like a really good example of my upbringing. Again, like, there is a lot of things within the Middle Eastern culture that I was thankful enough not to have done to me. Like, I don't know why I said it that way. That sounds so bad. I just mean, like, my parents weren't strict. Like, it wasn't like, you can't stay out past, like, this time, like, and I'm talking, like, an abnormal time, like, I don't know, 8 p.m. when you're 18, and it's not like they were like, oh, you can't have boys, or you can't date, or there's a lot of stuff in that culture where it's like you can't do certain things because it's seen as, like, you have to be like a prude little put together girl, and God forbid you do something that's a little risky. So thankfully my parents weren't strict like that. At the same time, they had nothing to worry about, because, like, I was truly like a good child. Didn't do drugs, didn't really like drink, get wasted. I was a pretty, like, good social, I had a pretty good social group, or like a group of friends. We were all pretty tame. There was really no, like, craziness happening. So to be fair, they had nothing to worry about. But at the same time, I think the reason for that is because of their excellent parenting of not being too strict. I know a lot of parents who are so strict on their child that the child ends up, rebelling. And that's just was never the case, because I always felt comfortable being honest with my parents because they weren't strict in that way. So, you win some, you lose some. But yeah, I think just those micro experiences is also kind of what shaped me into becoming more quiet and more reserved and just like less or not as comfortable taking up that space. But again, it's something that I'm currently like actively working on. Unfortunately, like I do tend to let people walk all over me, and it was way worse when I was younger. I think I've gotten a lot better at it. And even people who don't think that they're walking all over me, it's like, well, you kind of are. But at the same time, again, like I am at a place in my life where I'm aware of it. I think when I was younger, I wasn't as aware of it. I wasn't as conscious about it. And, you know, doing a lot of like self-work and self-healing and all of that stuff, that made me really aware of myself and the people around me. And now I can pick up on when somebody's trying to take advantage of me or like, you know, trying to like walk all over me. Now I notice it. And now what I'm trying to just actively work on is how do I, you know, like put those boundaries, and how do I speak up for myself? Because I do still have a hard time doing that. But again, compared to when I was younger or a couple of years ago, it's gotten way better. So, you know, that's a plus. Damn, it's crazy how a question such as, am I shy or is it just my anxiety, turned into all of this. But these are important things to mention. These are things, you know, these aren't things that we should be ashamed of to acknowledge or to admit. You know, admitting to your own flaws and things that you can work on. I think that's a healthy and positive sign, meaning like, yeah, you are aware of the things that you can better about yourself. But it's also important to be aware of the things that you have, you know, worked on. We get so hung up on the things we need to fix with ourselves that we don't always acknowledge the things that we have already bettered, you know? Yeah. I think sometimes we're a little too hard on ourselves. And we need to acknowledge our progress. We need to acknowledge our progress. We need to acknowledge when we're moving forward in life, even if it feels like we're moving backwards. And just pause and acknowledge those micro changes in our daily lives. Like if, for example, you know, this also actually ties really well into this concept of shyness and anxiety. So I just thought of another example I wanted to kind of talk about. I think a person who, you know, is shy, often when you Google shyness, like if you Google shy, the definition is somebody who's timid or bashful, quiet, reserved, yada yada. And maybe a person is, when they're shy, you know, they have a hard time answering phone calls or making phone calls or, you know, ordering stuff at the cashier. Like, let's say they want to order a drink, you know, they're a little bit more bashful, and maybe they're a little like fearful almost of doing these social things and having these social interactions. But again, the same can be said for people with anxiety, because I know people who do have anxiety have a hard time doing these things as well, like ordering for themselves, making phone calls. A big one is like, you know, when you're let's say you're at a clothing store and you need your size in something, or you want to try something on and nobody's like at the stand, like, do you go up to a cashier or somebody working and do you ask them to open up the fitting room for you, or do you ask them if they have your size? You know, these are things that people might not do when they're shy, but it's also things that they might not do when they have anxiety. I mean, definitely, like, I've had my moments when I'm like, fuck, like, should I ask them? Should I not ask them? But I also know that it's like, if I am feeling more anxious that day, it's harder for me to ask. But then there are times when I'm feeling amazing, so extroverted, and it's like, oh yeah, of course, let me just go up to this person and ask. So, there's times and places where you'll be more introverted, you'll be more extroverted, and I think it is on a spectrum. But somebody who is shy, it's constant. I think that's kind of how I made that distinction in my mind. Somebody who's shy is constantly in like that state of like, shit, like I don't feel comfortable asking for them, or they screwed up my meal, but I'm not going to tell, like I don't want to tell them. But I think somebody who's anxious and conditionally, quiet and reserved, meaning they're not always quiet and reserved. There's times when they will speak up for themselves, and then there are times where they won't. So I think that kind of like makes that distinction as well. And just tying this to what I was saying about acknowledging your micro progress, is like, if you are somebody who has a hard time, ordering something, like let's say you have a hard time going to a coffee shop and ordering a coffee, and one day you wake up and you're like, I'm really craving coffee, I want to go and get one. And you're sitting there, you're anxious and you're battling with yourself. You're like, no, screw it, I'm just going to go and do it. And you go and do it. That's progress right there. Might not feel like it in the grand scheme of things, but that's progress. It's such a small and minor thing. But we have to acknowledge those micro accomplishments. Because that's what's going to keep us excited to keep going. If we don't think of those as accomplishments, then we're never going to feel like we're accomplishing things, I also did touch on another thing that I wanted to expand on, at least like with myself, when I was saying that there are times when I feel more introverted and more times when I feel more extroverted. I think as a woman, depending on where you are in your cycle, you're going to be more introverted or extroverted. So there's 4 phases, right? There's your menstrual, your follicular, ovulation, luteal. And if I'm menstruating or I'm in my luteal phase, which is like right before your period, and often when you experience like PMS, don't talk to me. I'm going to be in the worst mood, truly. Going to be extremely introverted. I will have a hard time, asking a person at the clothing store to get my size, or to ask for the fitting room, or I just because of my anxiety. My anxiety will be really high. I'm going to have a hard time approaching people and asking for what I need. But when I am in my follicular and ovulation phase, when I'm in that state, I'm going to be so much more extroverted, more bubbly, more talkative. I won't really care about taking space. I will take that space because I have the mental clarity to do so. But when I'm menstruating and I'm in my luteal phase, I'm often like, I have a lot of brain fog, and there's going to be no way in hell that I do it. You see what I mean? So I think as women, we have to like keep that in mind as well. And I also think that's why it's like it's way more complex than just telling somebody like, oh, I think you're shy. Because no, I'm not. I'm just menstruating and I'm more introverted, and I could care less speaking, loudly and taking up space. But just come back next week, because I will be way more bubbly, and all of a sudden you're going to be like, wait, I thought she was shy. What happened? You see? And then they're like, oh, she opened up. It's like, no, I didn't open up. I was always this way. You just caught me at a bad time, Also, there's nothing wrong with being shy. I don't know why it's coming across that way from my end. I guess, like, for some reason, shyness has a more negative connotation in my mind, and I don't know why that's the case. Um, I guess it's just like the way it's felt when people use that term. It almost kind of comes out like from like a judgmental or even like a condescending way, um, where it's like, oh, like she's so shy. And I feel like when people say that, it's like, why do people say it that way? Like, it's not like you would tell somebody, oh, she's so talkative, in that same way. Usually when you claim that somebody's talkative, you say it in a more positive tone, and because like that's a good thing, like she's talkative, she's spunky, she has, she has fire. But when you're referring to somebody who's more quiet, all of a sudden it's like a negative thing, and as if it's something that needs to be fixed, but if she's talkative already, then there's nothing to fix. She's fine. I don't know why. I've just made that observation as well. And yeah, like if you're quiet and reserved or shy, like, dude, there's nothing to be fixed unless it's something you want to like change about yourself. But again, there's nothing wrong with being more quiet or more reserved, So what do we learn from today's episode? Be yourself. Nothing wrong with being quiet and reserved. Other people's perception of you is not who you are. It's okay taking up space. Well, did we learn that? I don't know if we really learned that, but it's okay taking up space. I'm telling you now. And don't let Susan walk all over you. All right, I'm done rambling on about this. I hope you enjoyed this topic, and again, comment down below and share your thoughts and your opinions on this matter as well. I'd love to, hear your insights. On that note, thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube or Spotify or wherever you are listening to this, and also make sure you're following me on Instagram. It's Mindfully Mad Pod. You can also follow me personally, just Michelle Melinet. I'll have them both linked down below. And again, please leave your comments, your thoughts. I'd love to know your insights on this topic, and I will see you guys next week.